So, Brian, Nolan asks, why do some manufacturers manufacture and charge more than $100 for steel nib pens, especially when there are gold nib options, which they need to compete with, being offered at lower price? For example, the Diplomat Arrow. Why would I grab something like that when I have brands like Sailor offering gold nibs at a lower price? That's a good question, Nolan.
I don't quite understand the Arrow and the Sailor comparison, because the steel nib Arrow is less expensive than a gold nib Sailor. But I get what you're saying, Nolan.
Yeah, I guess they're comparable.
Yeah, but I mean, so you have like the pilot.
You certainly do have gold nibs that are more expensive than. You certainly do see steel nib pens being sold more expensively than some gold nib pens, for sure.
Absolutely. You definitely see that. You see that across brands when you're comparing like one brand to another. So yeah, you go with like an Edison or Herbert or, something like that, or a Diplomat, right? The Arrow. So yeah, those pens are going to be more expensive than a Pilot E95S or maybe a Pilot Custom 74, even a Lamy 2000, right? So yes, there are definitely gold nib pens that can be less expensive than some steel nib pens. I think once you get into the entry-level gold nib pens, things start to get a little muddy because there often tends to be kind of a jump in price going from steel nib to gold nibs. But it's not completely exclusive like that. I mean, the nib.
You know what? Sorry to Nolan's point here. We do have the Vega Pro Gear Slim is exactly the same price as a steel nib Diplomat Arrow at $180 right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
I stand corrected.
So we do have a few of them. There's quite a range as far as Sailor goes. So it is possible.
Okay.
It certainly is possible.
All right, fair enough. But the essence of the question is still the same.
Right.
We don't need to get into the semantics of it, but basically, why are steel nib pens worth kind of more potentially, or why are they charging more than another company might charge for a gold nib pen? So, what I would say is you're getting different features of the pen, right? There's some other element of the pen that's adding its value rather than just the nib. So certainly, if you have a pen of the same model, like you can use the Arrow as an example. You can get a Diplomat Arrow with a steel nib and you're in that like 180 range. If you get that with a gold nib, you're in the 350 range. Same pen, just going up to the nib. So yes, there's a huge jump just going with the nib. However, I find that when you're comparing an entry-level gold nib pen, which is mostly what we're talking about, because that's sort of the entry level, anything in like the sub $250, $300 range, kind of like that. That's where it crosses over the most with some of the higher end steel nib pens. That's when there are other elements of the pen. You're not exactly comparing apples to apples, right? Like there are certain pens that are staples in those less expensive gold nib pens, where it's a really good value and you get a great writing experience. But, you look at a pen like the Custom 74, it's a great writing pen. I love that pen, but like the body of the pen, the material it's made of and stuff like that, it's not like the nicest pen, right? Like you're not getting a lot of unique design elements and really exotic materials and great theming and stuff like that. You're getting sort of a basic body of a pen. It's a very solid pen, but you're not getting a lot of the niceties that you would get if you got a more expensive pen body, right? But you're getting that nice gold nib. If you have, dollar for dollar, if you have a pen that's got a steel nib and it's that same price, you should be getting some other nicer features on the rest of the pen. Maybe in the filling mechanism, maybe in the material, maybe it's some limited edition nature, maybe it's more of a handmade thing from more of a craftsman, an artisan, as opposed to more of a mass-produced pen. Ideally there should be some other element to it that makes it cost more. It's not always the case necessarily. Or it might be that there's some actual cost that makes it cost that, and it's just not something that you value. So you don't see the value in it, in which I would say don't buy it because it's not something of value to you. But it definitely muddies up the water quite a bit. And Drew, we've seen this because it used to be a lot more distinct. It used to be that like if a steel nib pen was pushing up into like the gold nib pen kind of price range, it was like really pushed back against, and it had to be heavily justified. But I mean, part of my argument is that a lot of steel nibs are pretty good and pretty reliable. And yes, gold nibs have their place for sure and are worth it in a lot of ways to a lot of people. It's not like every gold nib is better than every steel nib or better for every person. I think there's a lot of people that like the stiffer nib feel. They like a little bit more of that feedback. They like maybe the way that certain steel nibs write better than most gold nibs, and the value may not be there for most of the gold nibs. So you could make that argument both ways. But I would say that if you're comparing pens that overlap that closely in price, you're finding that you're kind of getting like a little more pen, like especially in the pen body on the steel nib, than you are for the comparably priced gold nib pen. The gold nib pen is tend to be lighter, probably more plastic, not as, elaborate or exotic kind of thing. Whereas you're probably getting more of those special elements on the steel nib pen.
Yeah. And more or less it boils down to how much did this pen cost to make? Unless you're a brand who has made the decision to upcharge a bit based on your brand's reputation and perceived value and kind of just where you want to stay positioned in the market, then that's certainly a thing. But most of the time it is just because, hey, this pen costs this much to make, so we need to pay, we need to at least sell it for this much. And honestly, I was looking at our website right now, Brian. Sailor is a great way to kind of define this. So the Vega, for example, is a pretty flat blue color with some little bit of sparkles in there, but that's it. It's just one color, gold trim. That's $180 right now as of this recording. The Too Hot Habanero, same model, Pro Gear Slim, a whole lot more going on. That one's $280. So you're talking still has a gold nib, $100 more for the same pen model. But we're talking it's got a unique finial. It's got more than one type of plastic. So you've got a demonstrator component and then an opaque component to the acrylic that it's made out of. That's simply an example of one pen costing more to manufacture because it's got different stuff to it, and they need to, pay a little bit more to get it done. So you're going to pay a little bit more to have it in your collection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one misnomer is that manufacturing cost is the only element that factors into what something costs. I mean, where it's manufactured, the different currency conversion rates, what taxes are levied, moving from one country or one continent to another, all these come into play. So you put all that into the fruit salad of factors of determining a pen's ultimate price, right? Because the thing is, we're on the internet, so we see prices at different stores and all that. We're not thinking that deeply about maybe where it's coming from or where it originated and all that. But there's all these logistics along the way that have to be factored in that do make a difference. Even the pen material that it's made of can be taxed differently when it comes to export and import and stuff like that. So pens that are made of plastic might be one, cost of duties and customs fees going to a different country, whereas a metal pen might be different, whereas a precious metal, something with jewels or gold or whatever, may be completely different, category of taxes based on whatever agreements that those countries have come up with. So there's all these behind the scenes factors that go into it that happen after the actual point of manufacture. And that all kind of factors into it as well. And sometimes, that can throw things off in a way that may not even make a lot of sense to us as, when we look at the final end product. And sometimes, there's a great idea that a manufacturer has for a pen that needs to work, and it might work in one market but not in another because of all these other kind of behind the scenes factors. And so that's why sometimes you see pens available, for example, a Pilot and Sailor and all them, they have a lot of pens that are available in Japan and not in the US or not in Europe or whatever. Sometimes that's because by the time you factor in all the taxes and shipping costs and all these other things, the price gets so out of hand where it can't be justified in that market. So then it's only offered in Japan and all these types of things. So it gets complicated, but there's usually a number of factors involved that are probably just inside baseball and not all that interesting to everybody. But ultimately, it boils down to, is this something that you're interested in? Do you see the value? It's not purely just the price means it's a better pen or that you're going to be happier with it. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Cool.
Well, there we have it.